today we have my dear biological sister Jeannine with me, and Jeannine is an EFT practitioner, hypnotherapist, counsellor, healer of some extraordinary capacity, and Jeannine's going to talk to us about the things that can be done in this situation or any situation really to help yourself utilising these tools that she has. And she's also going to talk about her own journey, so her spiritual journey and journey of self-development, and how that, lessons and information that could come out of that would be useful to anybody watching us as well. So I hand it over to you, Jeannine. I will ask you questions as we go, and if you could just introduce yourself and talk about genesis and origins and about yourself. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So I was lucky enough to grow up in a household with a father and a mother that were on a very conscious sort of a path, and Dad learnt clinical hypnotherapy and was very, very interested in mind-body medicine, and right from a very young child I was really attracted towards all that sort of thing. So from a small child I sort of took on the idea of the mind-body connection and the fact that emotion, and particularly negative emotion, could impact the body and the body's health. So that when I was 7, I got the idea, as little kiddies can get the idea, that I was going to die in the night. So I started to become a bit of an insomniac at that stage, and lucky enough to have Dad, he came and taught me self-hypnosis at that stage. So I used hypnosis widely from there, and as I grew up, and then when I got to the stage of having our children, I used hypnotherapy for the birthing of the children, and have used it. And then I decided at a certain stage that I was going to go along and train in hypnotherapy. So I did that, and then from there I learnt EFT, emotional freedom technique tapping, and Bodytalk. So those have been the 3 modalities that I've used over the time. So I decided to specialise early on in fertility, and the reason I did that was because it had been very, very easy for me to have my children, and right from the word go I never ever took that for granted, and did think, how would it be for people that can't have children? So I've worked a lot in that area with people wanting to have that have been having trouble having children.
So tell us a bit more about the lessons that have come to you out of actually working with them. So clearly you're working with a particular kind of suffering when it's somebody who just is so desirous of actually having a baby, and or could be just one person in a couple, or it could be both people in a couple who are just desperate to do that. And what are the lessons that have come to you through that experience?
Well, I suppose the lessons, I'm not sure. One of the things would have been about, I think I always was grateful and didn't ever take it for granted, this gift of being able to have children. So lessons are reinforcing around that, I suppose. Is that what you mean?
Whatever, yeah. So when you're actually working with somebody with their suffering, so like you've got a particular class of suffering that you're working with people who are so desperate to actually have children. And I'm just wondering how those sort of lessons actually percolated into yourself in terms of a drive or something along those lines?
Well, it's an unfulfilled desire, and we would all have. I'm sure that I do, and everybody else has had times where they've had a desire that has been unfulfilled, and so it's about, I suppose, getting underneath all of that for people. And all the suffering that goes along with that. So the frustration, the feeling of being out of control, all of those things that go along with not getting something that you obviously so want and so desire.
Oh, fair enough. So tell us a little bit about the move into working with EFT. Was that particularly to support these people with the fertility work you're doing, or was it more general?
Much more general. I mean, probably about half my work is with fertility, and then the other half is with everything else. People come with all manner of things. So there's always a mind-body connection. It wouldn't matter whether it was a migraine or functional neurological disorder or whatever it is that turns up in the door. There's always going to be that connection. And I came across EFT. 3 people told me about it within about a week of each other, and none of them knew each other, as these things go. And so I thought I'd better investigate it. And I went ahead and did investigate it, and have gone from there. To me, it's been just the most fantastic tool, and so helpful. It's something that people, once they've had a few sessions with me, they learn how to do that for themselves. And so it's a very empowering thing for them to take away and be able to use themselves.
Cool. So tell me about the, like what you're actually seeing out there in the environment at the moment. Obviously, emotional freedom technique is a technique which is tremendously suited to, these sort of global fear crises type of situations that we're dealing with. Talk us a little bit through about what you're actually seeing, first of all, where you are there in New Zealand, in Auckland, or just north of Auckland. Mm-hmm. And then if you could just talk about how, these techniques which are around freedom, emotional freedom, how they operate. So sort of fill that out a bit for us.
Okay. So the main thing that seems to be in operation is the overall just fear, and people's major fear about all of this, whatever it is that they are fearful about, whether they're going to keep their job, very legitimate, and whether they're going to get sick or their mother's going to get sick, or all those sorts of things. So fear, anxiety are very, are things that are showing up. I mean, they show up in fertility, they show up anywhere. But if you're talking about this coronavirus at the moment and what's going on, that's the big thing. And the EFT is a very, very helpful technique for somebody to be able to state what's going on for them, how they're feeling, and all the aspects to what they are frightened of or what they're fearful of, and specific to that particular person, and talk about it, move it out of their energetic system. So one person may have it stuck in their throat, another person's got it stuck in their chest, another one's got it stuck in their stomach meridian, and being able to acknowledge that, move it, and actually have acceptance around it to gain some peace.
Okay, so it's about shifting it to the point where you can have some peace.
That's right. That's what happens, and and they'll get an emotional form of some peace, and they'll also get obviously a corresponding physical release and peace, some peace from that as well.
Okay, so you're talking about well, perhaps you could just very, very briefly describe it. EFT. So you are tapping on acupuncture points, so it's got a meridian activation process associated with it. But just speak it through, just like a very simple way of it. So simplify it down and see if you can just actually summarize it for people so they know what you're talking about.
All right. So it's a meridian tapping technique. So you tap on acupuncture end lines, and each one is related to a particular organ. So like this point here is related to your kidneys. There's one under your arm that's related to your spleen. That's the end line of the spleen. And so you go around and tap on all these points. And the difference is that you can go along and you can chat away to maybe a counsellor on something like this, and you talk away about it, and the energy often will just be running around and round, and you've got a really tight chest talking about it. So we talk about it, but as we talk about it, we tap on these acupuncture end lines. And what seems to happen is that people will just take some big deep breaths, they'll do whatever they need to do, and they feel it shift and move, the energy or the fear that's been locked up in their throat or in their chest or this sort of thing. And it also, what it does is it settles the nervous system, and it pops them back into a more relaxed state so that they then can be open to seeing a wider perspective, or be able to it's almost like being able to step back from the situation so that they can see another perspective to something.
Sure. So if people watching here, what advice would you have for them? What things could they do? Like, there's obviously resources available, and for the technique and so on. What would you suggest for people to do? Like, there's a global struggle going on here. What can people do?
That's right. So I would go to these techniques. First of all, you need to obviously be able to stop, become aware of how you're feeling, take a deep breath, create a little separation, be aware of how you're feeling, and that gives you a chance then to respond rather than to react in that state. Tapping, so learn some tapping, learn to be able to tap on this to once again to create that space. It's sort of, I describe it, it's like going from the panic room, from the reactionary place, and into the healing room, into a space where you have got some space and you can think more clearly and more objectively. And then hypnosis is a fantastic tool, as meditation, all these things are. They're fantastic tools for being able to get some relaxation, and then maybe some personal hypnotherapy suggestions in there, tailored for the person, so that they can be reinforcing in that quiet state how they'd rather be responding to the situation rather than reacting to the situation.
How important is it for a person to have access to somebody who can actually sort of guide them through these things? Like, you're talking about your own experience of being, taught self-hypnosis, and I was taught self-hypnosis around about the same time as well. So, but we were given guidance, weren't we? So, like right from the beginning, there was somebody actually saying, here would be a good thing to focus on. So how do you find that?
Sorry, in this last 16, 17 years of working with lots of people, they'll often come along to me and say that they tried having a look on the internet and doing these things, or reading a book and having a go at it. But they've found it, you know, often they've found it very difficult to do this by themselves. And so coming along and learning is a great thing to do. When I first learned the EFT, I had turns with a practitioner, and it was fantastic. So that's my, you know, if possible, that's my recommendation, is that people do.
Yeah. Oh, look, I get it, and you know, I do use hypnotherapy with some of my clients, but not that commonly. But all the same, there's nothing like actually talking to somebody, and
right.
you know, getting some outside perspective. It's that helicopter view, which is possible. So on that very topic, I'm going to ask you your helicopter view as to what's going on in the world at the moment with this coronavirus.
Well, I sort of see it that fear, a massive amount of fear has come in, and that people are in a very overall a fearful state, and that I also see huge opportunity for people there's more opportunity than ever before, really, to use this as a time for waking up. And I think a lot of people are using it as an opportunity. I see positives and negatives in this. The fact that so many people are locked down has been tremendous for them getting to know and spend more time with their children, with their families, these sorts of things. There's a lot of real good that could come out of this, but yes, I mean, the vibration around of fear and anxiety has been, and uncertainty, etc., has been really huge.
So you mentioned earlier these sort of tools like meditation, you know, that people would be familiar with, so breath work, and you know, if we think in terms of you know, say the work of Thich Nhat Hanh or those sorts of teachers, you know, there clearly are things that people can do to actually ground themselves and reconnect and observe and so on. I'm just wondering whether you could talk a little bit about you know, tools that, you know, if you were to find yourself in a situation where you had great fear, what would the tools be that you'd actually sort of go to immediately?
When this all started to really ramp up, and I found myself picking up on this vibration of the fear, I immediately went to the EFT.
Okay.
So I didn't need to do too many rounds of the moves of the tapping to get myself, you know, lower that anxiety, because there's no use. I feel like there's no point in me sitting around being really anxious.
What role is there, do you think, in you know, observing without interfering? So many commentators these days, they talk about you know, you shouldn't fight against, say, for example, anxiety. You shouldn't go against it. You should just observe it. What would your observations be around that?
Well, lucky enough for me, it's not a state that I'm sitting around in very much of the time. And so if I ever do get a bit anxious, I really don't like that feeling. So I'm not comfortable in sitting around with it personally. I don't like the feeling of it, so I'm going to do what I can to move it. And the tapping, the EFT tapping, has you really just observe it. Take a look at what it's about. Take responsibility for it. love and accept yourself anyway, and move, really move from it.
So the intention is to actually release the suffering. So the intention is to release it and to move away from it. But at the same time, you're actually accepting yourself just as you are.
Yeah, that's right. It's all understandable that people are anxious and that you get anxious and all the rest of it. Absolutely. It's normal.
Very good. Very good. So tell me, what would be, other than, like, I'm getting a strong sense that people should go and seek out somebody to help them. If they're lost in this kind of suffering, that the best thing for them to do is to actually reach out to somebody. I'm getting that strong message from you. Intermediate, like even if you've got an appointment, so you booked an appointment, your appointment's next week, what do you do this coming few days?
I suppose just on those very practical levels, I'd be really careful about hooking into, if you're talking about the present situation, I'd be really careful about not feeding in too much into the news and all the rest of it. Have a look at it once or twice a day, and be able to take some deep breaths in amongst it, and remind yourself, that you'll be okay. But yes, I would, and finding these different ways that people can relax themselves. There are such wonderful apps on the internet. There's one that I suggest to people called Insight Timer, and there's fantastic meditations on there for people. So, finding ways of being able to relax, really, and get back into your healing room.
Okay, so whatever it takes to actually get back into the healing room is the guidance. Very good, very good. So, tell me what your like take yourself out of the picture as being the practitioner, and you're now somebody who's got some advice for the world. What would that advice for the world be?
I suppose it's all about just doing your best to take care of each other. Do your best to, what they're talking about, to be kind to yourself and to others. Know that you are doing your best with the resources that you've got at any given time. I think it is. It's this opportunity for kindness towards yourself and kindness towards others. They're all aspects of this big one of love, really.
Okay. And it all starts with, having that kindness towards yourself. That's where it begins.
Really, you've got to, otherwise you have no reference for it really to be able to put out there, unless you've got some reference inside yourself. I think that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, great. So, any parting comments that you'd like to make? And obviously, we'll have links to so that people can find the work that you're doing, Jeannine, and to other resources that you might suggest to people, like that app that you're talking about. We'll definitely create links to those and on the conference website. So is there any sort of parting stuff that you'd like to share?
I can't think of anything offhand, Neil. No.
Okay, cool. Well, Jeannine Dawson, thank you so much, and it's an absolute pleasure to talk to you from just north of Auckland. And are you allowed out to go and get out to the beach?
Yes, absolutely. We've been going on beautiful walks here. So it's lovely.
Well, funnily enough, over here in Western Australia, they're actually arresting people on the beach. So
no,
they're trying to shut beaches down. And they shut down the parks, like the national parks and that sort of thing. So you might have 1,000 hectares and one person in it, but we've got to shut it down. Makes sense somehow, I'm sure. Anyway, Jeannine, thank you so much, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you.
All right, thank you.